You can now get a 30-day trial to experience The Athletic for free. Visit the link in the description below to try it now.
I've never seen a bear drive a fire engine before.
No.
So, Arsenal are good. Did you know that? Well, they are, and we have the data to prove it and some tactic stuff, because I am joined here today by my friend and yours, James McNicholas.
Hello.
That's James. And he knows all things about Arsenal. We're also joined by Dr. Mark Carey, who is over, where are you? Behind the board.
Behind the board, hello.
No silly songs this week for Mark? Or are there? I may have made a song by now. So in this video, we're going to talk about Arsenal and how good they are at football and the tactics they use to do that.
Lovely.
With some data to support that. Very important data these days.
You got to prove it. You got to have the numbers.
Ugh.
Exhausting, isn't it?
I know, there's so many of them. 1, 10. Arsenal are a really good team, and now we're gonna show you why with data and also the tactics board.
Yeah, data keeps me in a job. So it's basically just worth showing just how far, I guess, Arsenal have come to get to fourth now, because after 3 games, they had 0 points. They lost, all 3 of their games. They lost to Brentford, they lost to Chelsea, they lost
all right, mate.
to
Can we move on
Man
to the
City, but it ends well. So it's just kind of worth showing just here. It's basically a climb through the top 4, especially around sort of December to January. There was a big climb in their points tally, and from sort of mid-February onwards, you can just see, just kind of going over time, just how they've kind of reached the top 4. And now will they stay there? That's the big question.
Looks like a upside down squid.
It does a little bit. But it's, it demonstrates consistency. And actually, this run of Arsenal form and Arsenal results and progress, it probably goes back even further than that. There was that big blip at the start of last season, but really since Christmas last year, December 2020, when they changed the shape of the team, Emil Smith-Rowe came in, Martin Odegaard came in, they've been pretty consistent since then on, to be honest.
The other thing is underlying data, I believe, shows that they are genuinely good and it's not a fake, right? So this shows their, what is this? Tell me, please.
So this, the underlying numbers. So this is their expected goals for and against, and it's going actually all the way back towards the end of the Unai Emery period, and since obviously Arteta's come in. So just looking at it again over a longer period shows just how much you can sort of see their progress. And for quite a while, especially last season, you can sort of see it almost like a helix where the blue line is their expected goals for, so the quality of chances they're creating, and the red line is the quality of chances they're conceding. And there's quite a lot of change last season where at times they were conceding higher quality chances than they were creating, and then vice versa. So it was quite inconsistent, as you can see. But this season, especially after about 10 or 12 games, the quality of chances they're creating is as high as it's ever been under Arteta, and the quality of chances they're conceding is as low as it's been under Arteta. And quite a stark kind of difference you can see just towards the most recent kind of weeks there, that it's a really clear difference, and they're really creating a lot of higher quality chances than they are conceding. Again, the key now is to keep that consistent over a longer period of time.
Yes, let's look at how they do that. That's the important bit. I'm going to go to the board. Actually, I'll join you, Mark. In case you didn't know, Mark's very injured, so I'm
hopping a little bit.
Yeah. So, James, please correct me if I'm wrong now, but
I will. Don't worry.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think Arsenal play. I thought it was a 4-2-3-1 like this.
Yeah.
That's what I thought they played. So the differences they've sort of got now, the keys are that it's quite compact, so they play in quite a narrow shape, whereas you might have thought, like, with Arteta being not a descendant of, but he likes a way...
Disciple of.
Yeah, that's the one, of Guardiola's play, where they use a lot of width here. But Martinelli, whenever you see which highlights of goals that they've scored, they tend to be in really central areas, a lot of them at once. And is late overlapping runs from the fullbacks? Do they still get up as high as they did earlier on?
They do. They flood the box very well, actually. They often have about 5 players in the box. The big change, as we were sort of discussing earlier, is that while they were playing the double pivot of Xhaka and Partey, increasingly now it's just Partey as a kind of a lone pivot, and Xhaka's actually a lone Partey, a solo Partey, and it's Xhaka who is often the 5th man joining the penalty box, and that means Tierney's played a little bit more withdrawn, a little bit more conservatively, kind of balancing the right fullback on the other side. But you're right, Martinelli and Saka are the players getting to goal-scoring positions. Lacazette often dropping quite deep, and those guys are on the wings making runs from outside to in to get into those channels between fullback and centre-half. And they are the real goal threat in this Arsenal team, and Emil Smith-Rowe as well when he plays.
Yeah, that's right. So Martinelli, Saka, like Issa said, come inside these sort of half spaces here, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's quite important with Arsenal is how Odegaard links a lot with Saka, because he drifts out from this 10 space over to this sort of part here. Mm-hmm. But they're now playing a 3. You've got Xhaka on this left half space here.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Odegaard's over here. Lacazette drops as a false 9. So what you often get on like average position maps is they end up being almost like a flat 4 across here. When you think normally teams that attack with a lot of players have a front 5, but they've got a lot of depth to the attack.
Yeah, I think what's also useful to say is that Lacazette also does drop into the midfield ever so slightly as that false 9 and can help with the sort of the build-up in midfield areas as well, so that you can obviously get it to the wide areas where they can create that threat. So it's not necessarily Lacazette's remit to be the one to sort of finish up in the 6-yard area, but he does drop off well.
It's one of the big differences in how they used to play. So we did a video on Tifo IRL about Arsenal under Arteta before, and it was just never-ending like donut of sadness, where they would get into the final third.
The horseshoe of doom. Yeah.
Yes, and then just never put it in the box, right? So we've covered that. I won't go over it again. But this shows that they were creating most of the chances down this left side through Kieran Tierney last season?
Largely, yeah. So this is just split into the thirds in the opponent's half. Yeah, what percentage of the chances that were created were from each third? And a large majority were from the left-hand side. Whether that is Tierney, obviously Aubameyang was still there at that point as well. Maybe Smith Rowe at times, but you could see that it's very dominant towards this left-hand side. But if we look at this season, a lot of the chances are coming from central areas. 48% of the chances created are coming from that middle third, which is actually the highest proportion of any side in the Premier League this season. So it shows that they are obviously less reliant on Tierney and less reliant on so many crosses. Was it the famous crosses rant that I think Arteta had last season of just how many 33 crosses I think they had in one game, which was just absurd. And now they're actually able to sort of work it into more sort of lucrative areas by sort of link play and obviously getting it into those dangerous players.
Were they wider last season, James?
Yeah. Do you mind if I come and show you?
Yeah, can you do it? Yeah, I'm going to sit down.
So last season, what they were doing, admittedly the personnel were different, but a lot of the time they had White and Gabriel deep, and Granit Xhaka, who we think of as kind of the second midfield player, in build-up was often dropping in here. So as a kind of third centre half on the left-hand side. And what that meant is that Kieran Tierney was then pushing on very high. This wasn't Martinelli, it was Aubameyang. So when Arsenal moved into the attacking half, he was playing very narrow. And a lot of the play was focused through Xhaka in build-up. Can we get Tierney on the overlap? Can we sling in a cross? I think the North London derby last season was the one you were referencing, Mark. They slung in something like 35 crosses. Arteta said it's a question of numbers. Eventually, if you do it enough times, you'll score. Well, Arsenal didn't that day. It didn't really work for them as a system. So what they've since changed about that, and bear in mind, at the start of last season, we were still seeing Arsenal playing sometimes with a back 3. It was quite rigid. You had, instead of Saka on the right-hand side, it was Willian. A lot less dynamic as a team. So now they've managed to shift that about. So they've got White and Gabriel. They're two that they trust. They can properly build up with a 2 at the back. They don't need a third player dropping in. Xhaka, as we mentioned, is playing much, much higher. Tierney is playing slightly more conservatively. Tomiyasu, when he plays, has been tucking in. Recently, we've got to give some credit to Cedric Suarez, who has been filling in for Tomiyasu. And that's brought a bit more balance because Cedric's a more attacking, overlapping player than Tomiyasu, and it's meant that, but rather than focusing everything down the left, there's been a little bit more kind of egalitarian between the two wings. And then, as Mark was saying, I think Lacazette and Odegaard, these two here, they operate in a central space, and they've been integral in the way in which Arsenal create chances through the middle, not just in terms of the creativity, obviously we look into Odegaard for something like that, but also winning the ball back higher up the pitch, as we're going to talk about. You know, that's a great way for Arsenal to create chances. You think of the game at Vicarage Road, Bukayo Saka, you know, creating an opportunity by pressing high up the pitch, and they're doing that a lot better. And I think pushing Xhaka higher has enabled them to do that too. So even though it's not a role that perfectly suits Xhaka, he can look a bit uncomfortable in that kind of left 8 position. I think that it's moved the attacking emphasis of the team forward. And I think that's basically been the trend for Arteta over the last 2 years. He's gone from a team that were very defensive-minded, defensively focused, and he's slowly, gradually moved the emphasis up the pitch. And that's what we're seeing now with often, as you say, JJ, 5 players crashing the box at any one time.
And in terms of the pressing part, so this is the thing, they're not, like, they push up high, right? They play a high line, but they don't, they're not as intense as teams like Man City or Liverpool or something like that. I think Mark's got numbers for this as well, right?
Yes, that's something I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you via the scattergram. And this might help to explain it just a little bit better.
Mark! data, and he is here to tell us about the data. Won't you tell us, Mark? Wahoo!
What we've got here is the Premier League's PPDA, or passes per defensive action. So put simply, it's a proxy of how intense a team press. Now, the lower the PPDA, the higher the pressing intensity. As you can see here, Arsenal actually have the 13th lowest pressing intensity by their sort of higher number, if that makes sense. So you can see that they're fairly low down, which might suggest that they are maybe sort of lazy in their press and not actually all that intense. But I think it's important to kind of note that how they press, essentially. It's not that they are sort of gung-ho, it's that they're very controlled and measured in their press. And if we look at the next slide, you can essentially see the location of their pressures and how much that sort of relates to being above or below the league average. So as you can see here, they're sort of below the league average in pressing in the defensive third and the middle third, but they're well above average in pressing in the attacking third, in the final third, which is sort of shows that they essentially drop off when the initial press doesn't work and make sure they're in a really compact block. But otherwise, they try to make sure that they do press high in specific cases. So pressing triggers in more of a controlled manner rather than just kind of harem, scarem, really gung-ho, for like the likes of maybe a Leeds or something. So Arsenal are very kind of measured in their press, but not necessarily high intensity. It's in specific moments, which we can go back to on the tactics board. So, as I showed you in the scattergram...
Oh, you're back. You're right, the scattergram.
I'm back, yeah, just like that. Even with a bad leg, unbelievable. I can sort of show you this as well, where this is something that we did, didn't we, James, in a piece recently on The Athletic, which you should subscribe to if you haven't already, that it's not necessarily yet they sort of gung-ho in their press, but it's when they do press, they press high up and kind of with purpose. And this is basically showing a rolling average of how many times they win the ball, win possession in the attacking third. So looking this season, there was an initial drop, maybe kind of showing that their start wasn't all that great in terms of being really kind of high in their sort of aggression. But this really sharp increase is just showing just how much on average they are winning the ball for a high volume in the attacking third. And I think that the example of Saka's goal against Watford, which we spoke about, didn't we, of him winning the ball back, nicking it away from, I think, Tom Cleverley, getting into the box very, very quickly and finishing really sharply. So they aren't necessarily gung-ho, really high in their intensity, but their pressing is with purpose, waiting for the pressing triggers, and then going from there, which I think, does that match the eye test as well?
Yeah, it does. And I think the introduction of Gabriel Martinelli to the first team's helped. He brings a lot of intensity. You know, Arsenal's recent upturn in form and their sort of impressive XG differential has come since Aubameyang came out the side, which is kind of one of the surprising things. I think his introduction has really helped. I also think that Arsenal are a team that really focused on shape and distances. And when they lose possession, they're very organised, they're very compact.
Oh, go and show that on the board.
How do we do that? Yeah, so I mean, Arteta's teams, you know, again, not surprising given his coaching history, his trajectory, are very based around positional play. And when Arsenal lose possession, they are incredibly compact. I mean, you know, Tomiyasu tucks in, Tierney tucks in. They're quite narrow within the width of the pitch. You've got Partey there. Xhaka often drops right deep next to him like that. Odegaard a little bit further ahead. Lacazette filling in. This is a diamond, really, that protects the middle of the pitch. Saka and Martinelli stay high and wide to offer that threat on the counter. But Arsenal have had excellent form from their centre-backs, Gabriel and White, this season, but so much of that is owed to the protection that they get in front of them, the assistance they get from their full-backs. And when Arsenal do press from the front and they miss it, they miss the first press, something they're very good at is being organised behind that, making sure their distances are tight, their distances are compact, there isn't a lot of space for the opposition to exploit. And all the time, while these guys push back, these two, they do work back occasionally, but they stay high, they stay wide. They offer Arsenal that outball. And in players like Ramsdale, White, Gabriel, they now have technical people at the back who can find them early and provide a threat on the counter.
Do they do that? Do like White and Gabriel, and Ramsdale try and hit them?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, so it's interesting if you watch, particularly I think Martinelli. I mean, there've been several occasions this season. There was one in the home game against Man City where Ramsdale played like a 60, 70-yard pass, and Martinelli, he's got the first touch to be able to bring that under control. Suddenly Arsenal away on the counter. Saka the same. I mean, you think of Saka as quite a slight young player, but he's someone they aim a lot of goal kicks at, ask him to hold it up. He's so good with his back to goal, turning on the ball, that he's able to do that. So these two, they also provide an outlet, because Lacazette, look, he offers a lot, but he's not an aerial threat. He's not really someone you can lump the ball long to. So a lot of the time they're going wide to these guys. Another trick Arsenal use, if Tomiyasu's playing, Ramsdale might look to him here because he's very good in the air, about 6'2", very dominant. And if he wins it there, and you've got Odegaard, you've got Saka, you've got Lacazette, who's often in this right channel, often you can build the play from there. Yeah, exactly, create an overload on that flank of the pitch. So they've got lots of ways of doing it now, but I do think that organisational element has been key really to their success. And pressing is something I think they could still improve on, and I think Arsenal acknowledge that, especially the high intensity in the opposition's third. I think they still want to get better at that. But when they fail in that regard, they've got the organisation behind to support them.
And I think you, James, have another bit of data that Mark doesn't on set pieces. It's very high detailed.
Oh yeah. Well, they haven't conceded from a corner this season, which is remarkable, really, and it's a great record. I feel like the more we talk about it, the more likely to happen it is, probably in the next game.
And they're the only side to not concede as well. It's worth saying that every other side in the Premier League has conceded from a corner. And they've scored, I think, 11, maybe 12 goals from set pieces this season. Last season, that was 6 across the whole total season. So they're doing really well at both ends.
New coach, what's happened there?
Yeah, I mean, they had their first ever set pieces coach last season, a guy called Andreas Jorgensen, who came in from Brentford. He moved on to be a technical director at Malmo in Sweden, but they replaced him with Nicholas Jover. Is that his name? Jover, who actually was Jorgensen's predecessor at Brentford and then went on to Man City, where he worked with Arteta. He's done a fantastic job. In terms of attacking set pieces, Arsenal have really simplified things. I mean, a lot of the time they're going with just very direct balls into the near post. They're not taking short corners. There've been good deliveries from Saka, from Smith Rowe, from Martinelli. And a lot of it just comes down to the fact that in Gabriel, Partey, White, Tomiyasu, they now have players who can really attack the ball, and they're getting a lot of success with that. Defensively, it's a bit more intricate. You know, they use a combination of zonal and man marking, but the record's been very good. I think probably some of that's down to having Aaron Ramsdale as opposed to Bernd Leno, who is a bit more active off his line.
Absolutely. I was going to say about when you're saying about Ramsdale before, he's sort of multifaceted in that he's got such good distribution, obviously on the ball, but from a statistical perspective, his shot stopping is actually right up there, I think, in the top 2, maybe 3 of Premier League goalkeepers this season. Yeah, so he's actually saving a lot more goals than they're expected to concede. So it shows good recruitment from Arsenal.
Well, that brings us on very nicely to the next bit I want to talk about, which is recruitment. Recruitment! Are Arsenal good at it? Let's find out. I am now behind the board, and they are sat down. But you didn't see that happening. It just happened. That's how editing works. This is the transfers that Mikel Arteta made. I think he got a couple of loans in when he took over in December, wasn't it? 2019, I think.
Yeah, and so actually 2 of those players, Pablo Murray and Cedric, they joined on loan before becoming permanent transfers in the summer.
So, I mean, Cedric's been all right. Willian...
Less said the better, probably.
Yeah, Murray. Gabriel, very smart signing here. Thomas Partey's been really important this season, especially. Obviously, trouble with injury for a long time. But those are all good purchases, and they're at decent ages. So he's trying to form a team, because Arsenal have the youngest squad, the youngest first team in the entire league.
Youngest team, I think it is, yeah. And youngest manager.
They're very young. And this is the signings made this year. So there's quite a bit of money spent. But again, like Ben White and Gabriel, they've now got a centre-back partnership which works very well, is reliable. They can play out from the back, they can defend and score headers as well, very useful. Odegaard's been hugely important. Ramsdale, I think, caught a lot of people out. I thought he wasn't going to be an amazing signing. Turns out he's one of the best of the entire season. This is what they've done. And often managers, so all the things we've seen with Arteta that James and Mark have been talking about, that's all the coaching and planning and structure and all the things they do in the training ground. But a lot of what a manager is judged on is often the recruitment. Has Arteta as been good? Is he a good manager? Is this what we're seeing?
I think so. I mean, obviously at Arsenal, it's a sort of collegiate process. You've got Edu, who's the technical director there as well. There's a scouting team feeding into it. But Arteta has a lot of sway. And a lot of these players we're talking about, particularly in this most recent summer window, were guys that he specifically wanted. Arsenal had a really clear strategy in that summer. I mean, all 6 of those players were aged 23 and under. So they were clearly looking to rejuvenate the squad, to build a foundation that could sustain over the next 5 years. And I think they're probably getting results out of that maybe quicker than they anticipated.
Are they ahead of where they're meant to be just now?
I think so. I think if they were to achieve top 4 this season, I think that would probably put them about a year ahead of schedule. You know, I think they'd probably be looking at top 6 maybe this year and then pushing on for Champions League next year. Obviously, other teams slipping up and the lack of European competitions given that opportunity, that chance at top 4, and they're desperate to take it.
Yeah.
But I think they probably are ahead of even where they anticipated. One thing worth saying is, when you make 6 signings in any window, you expect 1 or 2 to not work out. And
it's really hard getting a gel. I mean, Wenger used to say all the time that you can maximum 3 or something like that. 3 or 4 is the maximum you can get into a team.
And what's incredible and quite remarkable, and I guess fortuitous to some extent, but also they deserve some credit for it, is that all 6 of their signings last summer have, by different degrees, been successes. And there have been plenty of games in which all 6 of those players have finished up on the pitch, which is a pretty remarkable turnover in personnel. And to make that work so quickly is a credit to the club.
And in addition to the players they've brought in, they've brought through a lot of young players as well. I mean, Odegaard counts as a young player. Saka has been amazing. So you've got Saka, Emil Smith-Rowe. Who else they brought in that's young? That's just
Martinelli, I guess.
There we go.
Yeah.
So all these players count as basically new players and are really important. What does this thing show us here, Mark, that I'm looking at?
Odegaard's really good at kind of picking up spaces in the right half space and obviously coming into central areas as well. And it's everything we spoke about before and creating overloads and linking really well with Saka. And again, that Watford game especially, they linked up specifically really well. I think with the Saka one, it just kind of goes to highlight just where he creates so much. He often keeps wide, as you
think of him as a wide player, not a winger, but you think of him as being a wide player, and he isn't really. He's sort of a central forward, almost.
Well, he can come narrow. I think one of the best things about Saka's game now is he's got the ability to go inside and outside. And actually, in the last sort of 18 months, increasingly we've seen him using his right foot. So, you think of him as a left-footed player on the right, fullbacks are going to always want to push him inside. Yeah. But now he's got that unpredictability. He can go either way. He's adding goals to his game, which he always had in the academy levels. So he really is, I think he's Arsenal's best player. And he's so integral to everything they do. So, and his partnership with Odegaard has been critical. We spoke about rebalancing the team, not just attacking down the left. Their partnership on the right-hand side has been a big, big part of that. And they've just got a great chemistry. Yeah. And it's sort of everything that Arsenal do for an attacking front kind of hinges on that pairing at the moment.
Well, the last thing I want to talk about how Arsenal suddenly got good, not suddenly, it's taken a while, is man management and how he's dealt with getting rid of certain individuals that, what we were trying to say earlier when we were talking this before, is that the culture's changed at the club.
Culture has changed, I think.
I think I saw you tweeting or something about how it feels like you feel connected to the players again.
Yeah, it's true.
For a while it wasn't like that, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's Arsenal. It's not too long ago. I remember fans giving the players stick or giving the manager stick, and
Xhaka is still there.
Well, exactly. Yeah, throwing the armband down, and I remember an incident with Hector Bellerin at Crystal Palace, but. There's a real sense of unity, and that's a big key word for Arteta, unity. He did a great interview with Amy Lawrence on The Athletic where he spoke about that. And I think he's really managed to engender that. There have been casualties. You speak about man management.
He's killed people.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. No, I think, obviously players that depart the club. You think of Mesut Ozil, Matteo Guendouzi, most recently Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang.
But good players, right?
Yeah.
Then the benefit you get from getting rid of them outweighs the talent they would have given you on the pitch.
Well, at the moment, exactly. And those players have big followings, and there's fans who I think were probably really upset when those players left. But it's very difficult to argue with the end result. You've got this very unified squad, club, the team are playing well. The Aubameyang example is fascinating. He left the club. Arsenal seem to have blossomed since then. Equally, he's doing really well at Barcelona. I think sometimes... the separation is just the right thing and everybody benefits. So Arteta's got this quite hard line, it's non-negotiables, and it's not to everybody's taste, but when it works, you can't really argue with it.
And it's working now, and this video it's about how Arsenal got good, but are they good? Because they've played some not amazing teams.
Yeah, that's I suppose the one thing that these charts don't necessarily demonstrate is that they've had a good run of fixtures of late, and there's a tough run coming up. They've got games in hand between now and the end of the season. They've got to play Chelsea away, they've got to play Spurs away, they've got United at home. So this will really test their mettle. I do think that almost whatever happens between now and the end of the season, barring a spectacular collapse, jinx alert from me there, I do think that they've made really demonstrable progress, and they do deserve credit for that. It'd be fantastic if they could cap that. Fantastic from my perspective, they could cap that and go on and take the place in the top 4. But they'll need to keep this up because the fixture list it doesn't get particularly kind between now and the end of the season. And I think when you look at some of the other teams, arguably in the race, they've got easier games.
I like the way you use the word demonstrable because it sounds like monster. And I like monsters.
Yeah, it's good.
Who doesn't? Do you like monsters? Leave your comments below about monsters. Anything else you want to add on Arteta or monsters?
No, I just really enjoyed this whole video. It's been fun. Thank you for having me.
But what do you think about monsters?
I love monsters, especially when they're under my bed.
Oh, that's good.
I'm scared of monsters. And I'm scared of Arsenal's running, so it all fits together.
Venn diagram.
Arsenal's running is the real monster. That's it from us. Now you know everything about Arsenal. See you later.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and Rafa Honigstein. There are journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.